Hello and welcome back to another NihongoGamer video. It's been a while since I've done a drawing video, but I had the opportunity to do one mainly because I was asked by TourBox to do another video for their newest product. So I've actually got 3 videos out, and the first 2 were shorts. I did like a programming one and one just demonstrating the haptic feedback of the device, but they didn't actually ask me to make a review video. They just said, can you use this product while making a video? So instead of doing a TourBox review, this is just a drawing video for a character from one of my favorite fighting games. It's Under Night In-Birth. Now, the reason I'm drawing a character from Under Night In-Birth is that just this past weekend, there was a tournament for Under Night In-Birth. The tournament's called Climax of Night. And as far as I'm aware, it's like the main big one, which is like dedicated to games that are, by this company, French bred. But I think they've also expanded to include some other game franchises as well. So I'm going to be talking about the hardware that I'm using to drawing, this Huion tablet, the pen, and especially the TourBox Elite. But let's just talk about the character that I've chosen, because you may be wondering, like, what is this actually going to turn out to be? So the character is called Byakuya. He's just one of the characters that you can play in Under Night In-Birth. But the reason I've chosen him, and spoiler alert, is that he was the character used to win the tournament Climax of Night by a player known as Big Black. Personally, I don't actually use this character myself, but he's really fun to watch, and he's got like a spider web thing going on. So he's got like the Marvel Spider-Man Iron Spider type costume, where he's got like actual octopus legs coming out, small spider legs coming out the back of his suit. Byakuya's got something like that. He's got these floating spikes. He's got 8 of them. And in addition to these spider leg type legs, he's also got the ability to launch webs, and you can capture your opponents in these webs. So he's a really cool character, but yeah, the main reason I'm drawing him is because he was used to win the tournament. Now, what you're watching right now is the rough sketch, and as of, the past few years, I've changed from drawing head first, or like always measuring the top of the body and the bottom of the body. Instead, for me, the most important thing is deciding kind of where the position of the hips are, because you can rotate a character all sorts of ways, but I just find that if you know where the hips are, it's easy to have the character sitting down or standing up, and generally you can understand the position of the character in space much more easily than if you draw the head first. Now, there are some situations where it helps to draw the head first, but it's just such a cool technique that I never really thought of, because when you first start learning to draw, the first thing you copy from your favorite illustrations that you find in magazines is usually like the face or the eyes. So what I've done here is drawn a really large circle, which is basically the position and the size of the hips. Then I draw the rest of the torso extending from that, then a head, and then I can just plant the arms and the legs onto the torso as necessary. One thing I did notice while drawing is actually the proportions weren't quite what I was expecting, and it's because I haven't used this pen display very often at all, actually. I have a review video that I did for this. It's the Huion GT221 Pro. I actually made that video like 4 or 5 years ago, and it was at that time the biggest tablet I had ever used, and I still really like it. But the main thing is it is still really big. So if you use what my system is, which is a Mac and a PC, and then I've got my games consoles, and I've also got my cameras set up for streaming and for making videos, it's like the last thing I have space on my desk for is also a 21.5 inch drawing pen display. So as a result, over the past few years, I haven't actually had many opportunities to use this tablet very much. But every time I do use it, I actually really enjoy using it. When I draw with a really large screen, as you can see, the head of the character is actually physically just much further away from me than if I were drawing on my iPad, which is a 12.9 inch display, or my Mobile Studio Pro, which is a 13.3 inch display. And I'm going to blame the fact that my proportions were off at the start of this illustration, mostly because the screen is, so tall that the character just extends further and further away from me. And so when you're just sitting and looking at the screen, which is at a 45-degree angle right now, the character kind of looks taller than they actually are. But when you kind of lean over the screen and look at it at, perpendicular, that's when you start to notice that the proportions aren't quite right. And that's just a balance that you have to find. And also, you just get used to it as well. Really, for me, I think the main thing is I just haven't been using this tablet very often. But what I can say after using this tablet for a couple hours to draw the illustration that you see here is that Man, it is so luxurious having a large screen to draw on. The second thing is I've also just applied a screen protector. Okay, 5 years after receiving this tablet for the review, I finally added a screen protector to it. Now, it's got sort of a matte texture to the screen, but it's not really as toothy as the etched glass that you get on like maybe a Mobile Studio Pro. So what I've put on here is an Elecom paper type textured screen protector, and it really puts a lot of tooth on the screen. And immediately the main benefit that I felt from that is that I'm not kind of chicken scratching at the screen as much as I used to. Usually I like scratch like tiny lines until I've got like a solid long line. But when you've got tooth and actual grip on the texture of the glass, you can kind of glide your pen nice and slowly and only draw the line that you want. And whether or not that's required when you're drawing digitally, it just saved me a lot of time and a lot of effort, and I definitely felt like my wrist hurt a lot less than when I normally draw. But the one thing I wasn't too keen on while drawing on this was the actual weight of the pen. Now, as you can see, this is not the original pen that shipped with the tablet. It actually shipped with a tablet that has a rechargeable battery in it, but the battery just died over time. And so I was like, okay, well, just because I can't use the stylus, does that mean I really can't use the tablet anymore? But fortunately, Huion sells a very, very affordable replacement stylus. And instead of being rechargeable, you can actually just put a physical AAA battery inside it. I can't remember exactly how expensive it was, but I think this stylus was something like $20 or $25. So that's enough about the tablet, but let's talk about the character that I'm drawing here. So the first thing I did, obviously, was draw that circle, which is the position and size of the hips. Drew the torso, the head, and the appendages, and then after that, I went in and started adding the clothing to the character as well. That's when I realized that the proportions were kind of off. So I fixed the proportions, went back and redid the clothing, and then put in some details on the hair and the face and a little bit of basic shading. As for the pose that the character's in, this is actually just a very standard pose from the actual official artwork that, ships with the game. So this is not like a special pose that I invented. I'm using a reference image from the game to draw this. Now, I don't know exactly what Byakuya's storyline is. I know there's something like he's got this like puppet that he controls because his sister died, but he wants to still be with his sister. So he's like trained the puppet to be his sister. I don't know. It's really bizarre. But anyway, I think the outfit he's wearing is just his standard school uniform, but he's unbuttoned the shirt and unbuttoned the jacket. And the jacket is one of those Japanese school uniform jackets that has I don't know what you call this. It's like an upturned collar, a little bit like a priest. I don't know. Is that the right description? Anyway, he's got his shirt untucked and you can actually see the shirt sticking out from underneath the blazer. And something that's actually kind of fun about Byakuya is that he doesn't really punch and kick so much with his actual arms and legs. I think most of his attacks are actually done with those floating spider hooks that he's got behind him. I will say one thing that was a little bit dull about drawing the character's head was that his hair is kind of boring. The outline of his hair is basically just a circle, so it's not super thrilling, but I think the fun aspect of drawing Byakuya's face is really the eyes, because if you look closely at his eyes, he's got the upper eyelids like partially closed, so it's part way between looking sleepy but also kind of sly, like he's plotting something evil. But really, my favorite thing about drawing Byakuya's face was actually the cheek line. Now, if you look at the promotional material for Under Night In-Birth, the French-bred characters were all drawn, like their profile images, were all drawn with this very French-bred style, where for the main human characters, the cheek actually kind of juts out quite a lot, but then it really tucks in as it slides toward the character's chin. I think I could have exaggerated it even more, but I went for more of a balanced look. Now, finally, at the end, when it comes to the coloring of the character, this is actually the color scheme chosen by Big Black when he won the tournament using Byakuya, and it's not personally my favorite color scheme just because it reminds me so much of McDonald's, but it is quite cool. It's black and yellow, which has got that bumblebee look, but then this totally wild, I don't know what you would call it, salmon or red trousers. It's an unusual color scheme, but as a result, I think it's easier for people to claim that color as their own, and definitely winning a tournament like Climax of the Night with this color. People, when they see this color now, they're definitely going to think of Big Black, the player who won the tournament using this color. Now for the TourBox itself, of course, this isn't a review video, but they did send it to me hoping that I would make videos while using it. So in this drawing video, in my left hand, you can see the TourBox, and the main thing about this device is that one, the new version, the Elite, is Bluetooth. So you finally don't have to plug it in with a cable. It actually runs on batteries, and it's not just an internal battery that you'll have to, buy a whole new TourBox when it dies. It just uses standard AA's, and I think that's really thoughtful because a lot of devices that have built-in batteries, once the battery dies, it's like you got to replace the whole unit, and it's such a waste. So changing the batteries are convenient. The fact that it's Bluetooth means you don't have to plug it in with a cable, and if you're bringing this to like a cafe or something, if let's say you've got like a Surface Pro and the TourBox, it seems like such a shame to have a really nice tablet that you can draw on and then have to wire this cable to it. And then when you're in a cafe, it becomes a bit of a tripping hazard. It's just kind of unwieldy. But like I mentioned in a couple of the shorts videos that I released last month, one of the coolest things about the new TourBox Elite is that it's got haptic feedback. So on the device, you can see here, there are 3 main dials, and on the original version, they are just free spinning dials, which is fine and it works really, really well. But now that I've experienced the TourBox with haptic feedback, I just don't think I could go back to not having it, because the main functions I was using with these dials was 1, rotation, 2, zooming in, and 3, changing the brush size. Now for rotation, you don't really need haptic feedback so much, and even zooming in, you don't really need haptic feedback. But when it came to the brush size, sometimes you can really barely tell whether the brush size is changing from the cursor on screen, because when you're zoomed out, a brush size of 3 pixels or 5 pixels, you can barely tell whether the brush size has actually changed and how many levels it's changed. But because of this haptic feedback, even when I'm zoomed out like this, if I change the brush size on my pencil and it goes from the setting 3 to setting 5 to setting 7, I know that I've gone up only a single increment and that I haven't zoomed out into a massive brush or a brush that's way too tiny. Now the thing is, if you want haptic feedback and the Bluetooth feature of the new TourBox Elite, it does come at a premium. It's like $100 extra on top of the previous version of the TourBox. One of the main reasons that TourBox sent me this in October and asked me to release the video in October is because there's actually a sale on right now. So on Amazon, it's $268, which is $100 more than the original TourBox Neo. But if you can catch the sale before it ends on October 31st, you can get it for $225. And at that price, it's kind of a no-brainer. You definitely want to go for the one that has haptic feedback. Getting back to the drawing, this is just a pencil sketch with coloring, so I didn't do anything too in-depth with the colors. Basically, there's a base color, a shading color, and some very, very simple highlights that are just added here and there. If I were going to go a couple steps further with the coloring on this, I would probably have added some soft shading, and then on top of that, I probably would have added more shading to the clothing so I could show more of the fabric textures and also the folds. But essentially, that is it for this illustration. Again, it took me about a couple hours to do, but it was a real pleasure to finally draw on the Huion again. And really, the only reason I haven't been drawing on it that often is just because it's big and I just don't have space for it on my desk. And, on this channel, I keep reviewing new stuff like new controllers, or I was getting back into some music writing recently. I've also got this driving wheel for Gran Turismo. And eventually it just becomes difficult to have a good desk setup where you have access to all the different tools that you like to use. I think the last thing I'm going to say is that if you're interested in drawing digitally and you're trying to buy a device to do so, like an iPad Pro or a Wacom tablet or a Huion tablet, you'll often hear discussion about parallax and laminated displays. But what I realized after drawing for 2 hours is that you don't think about it. You just forget that parallax is a thing, and this GT221 Pro does have an air gap between the screen and the glass. But once you're in the flow of the drawing, it really just doesn't matter. Now I can say that with confidence because I draw on a Wacom Mobile Studio Pro and an iPad Pro, and they've both got unbelievably gorgeous screens where it really feels like the ink is coming right off the pen and into the display. But it's a luxury that I have, and even when I don't have it, like today when I was drawing on the Huion GT221, literally after about 2 minutes of drawing, I wasn't thinking about the parallax anymore at all. It just felt like business as usual. I'm just drawing onto the screen. If you're interested to see more of my drawing content, I have shifted most of my drawing output to a separate channel, so I'll put the link in the description below. So do like the video if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment below if you've got any questions about the hardware, like the TourBox Elite or the Huion drawing tablet that I used. Subscribe to the drawing channel, subscribe to this channel. Congratulations to Big Black for winning the Under Night tournament at Climax of Night. I watched the stream, it was awesome. And last but not least, rollback for Under Night, please. So that's all for today. I'll see you in the next NihongoGamer video.